Jill grunted slightly as she felt the abandoned bus as she was being violently turned over. The huge creature tried to tear and attack the metal carcass to grab her, and Jill shot the monster in the head with her rifle, keeping the creature's attention to herself rather than causing damage. "A little help here would be welcome," she shouted. In a matter of moments, Chris climbed over the overturned bus and leapt over on the creature, landing just above its huge tail. Chris plunged his knife deep into the creature's flesh, but grunted in frustration as he saw that the blade didn't penetrate it very deep. The thing's skin was quite thick. The creature roared and tried to take off, but Parker soon appeared and shot the weak part just below the creature's tail, preventing it from taking off. Chris looked up and threw the body to the side as he was being attacked by the huge tail. The attack would surely kill him. He landed on the ground and threw a grenade under the legs of the huge infected bat. The grenade exploded and the creature staggered to the side, just as Jill got out of the bus and raised her rifle, firing at the weak point of that thing. "Stun grenade!" Parker shouted. 3 of them closed their eyes and covered their ears. The grenade exploded while the creature struggled in disorientation, its hearing its damage. Chris and Parker put the C4 into the sides of the creature's tail at the same time as Jill threw a grenade into its mouth. They turned away and ran away, and Chris pressed a small button on his hand, triggering the C4. The explosion together was huge, intense, and powerful, throwing pieces of flesh, plus the exoskeleton and bones were everywhere. The huge pummel of smoke rose into the sky, and the noise echoed through the deserted streets. Chris lowered his arm, observing as much damage from the explosion. The number of creatures that could survive such a plastic explosive blast was very small. Tyrants, infected G, and those who were designed to cause such destruction as possible. He took a few steps closer, meeting up with a small group. "Are you guys okay?" Parker asked, staring at the remains of the creature just in case. "Yeah, what the fuck was that?" Jill said to no one in particular. No one there had seen a creature like that. Animal diverted mutations, yes, but that type was new. It looked like a bat with a scorpion's tail. "It's nothing like that on the records," Parker said, reloading his rifle and looking around. "In other words, it's a new variant," Chris said, doing the same as his partner, ran his eyes over the surrounding buildings. The street was blocked by a huge iron gate, which had a small passage in the corner, opening them enough for them to pass through the gate. There were cars and buses scattered around the abandoned street. For decades at least, there was equally abandoned buildings. To the left was a factory on the side of the wall was destroyed, and next to the right was an overturned bus with a small playground with broken toys. "Okay, that's not a good sign. Any ideas where they took your sister?" Parker asked, turning around and observing the scene once more. They felt a strange sensation, which made their bodies uneasy. They felt as if someone was watching them. After what happened with the helicopter, it was probably exactly what was happening. "They don't want the money. They're not doing it for some kind of revenge. Considering this creature was a new variant, I assume they brought her here for experiments," Chris said with a clear disgust in his voice, anxiety rising in his chest. "We have to find the lab," Jill said, looking at the small device that showed the heartbeats nearby. She was interrupted by the large sound of something being destroyed, and an explosion happened right behind them. They quickly turned and raised their weapons. Their eyes focused on the huge creature with the bowl under its left arm, what appeared to be on fire, similar to the mouth of the cannon. The creature was huge, with a robust body that scars to stitch the wounds. It looked like it had been extreme torture. Its head was wrapped in bloodshed bandages that encased in the small metal cage, leaving open its glowing yellow eyes visible. The creature roared and soon raised its huge cannon, shooting a fireball towards the group, who quickly moved away. An explosion occurred and the impact was so strong enough to send them to the ground, but without taking too much damage. "What the hell was that?" Parker asked to no one in particular, as they regrouped and prepared to fight in the other roars of the creature around them. The infected people were emerged from those buildings. All of them are humanoid, some larger than others. Others have raising huge axes or normal-sized cleavers. All of them were running towards the group. The ground shook as the huge creature with its cannon in its hand, also running towards them. "What the hell? Cover your ears!" Parker roared, throwing the stun grenade near to the ground. They closed their eyes and covered their ears as the grenade exploded, stunning all the infected nearby. Chris was the first to act. He ran down the infected closest to him and plunged a knife into the side of his rifle into the creature's neck. He then tackled the infected man to the ground, knocking it, and finished it off with a shot to the head. "We can't stay here on the streets," he shouted, turning and firing at the huge creature with the cannon, causing the beast to stagger backwards. Jill and Parker shot at the infected around them, making their way towards Chris, who was entering the abandoned factory. Jill and Parker shot the infected around them, making their way over. The creature roared in annoyance and threw the cannon to the ground. Then from its back, pulled out an M220 knee flash, a frickin' rocket launcher with 4 barrels. They even entered the factory just before the wall behind them was destroyed by a concentrated explosion, causing Parker to stagger and fall to the ground. Chris and Jill gritted their teeth at the sight of the huge infected man with its huge head covered by the iron cage and a huge axe in his hands. An axe which was infected and raised to prepare to kill the man. Chris started shooting while Jill stepped forward to help the man. The creature staggered a little from the blast bullets it hit, but just in case, as soon as Jill got close, she grabbed the tactical shotgun on her back and fired the blank point into the creature's chest, watching the monster practically thrown backwards on its back and fell to the ground with a hole in its chest. "Parker, are you alright?" she asked, helping the man to his feet. In response, he just shook his head. They ran through the factory, looking for an exit or something that would surely get them out. To the left where they were standing, just fallen, and old dusty shelves with long-forgotten machines. On the right, there was a broken staircase with dozens of steps above the ground. It would have to do. They ran towards the stairs, only stopped with the rocket explode right behind them, causing them to stagger backwards and grunt as they felt the impact and small pieces of debris hit them. Chris gritted his teeth and took lead when he saw a small group of infected advance towards him. "We're gonna have to deal with them," Chris said, firing at the infected and grunting slightly in frustration as he saw more coming. "Parker and I can distract the big guy for now. Deal with the smaller ones," Jill said. Before Chris could say anything, he was already running to the side, practically dragging Parker along with her. Jill leaned against the wall to the one side of the window, and Parker leaned against the other. The woman picked up her rifle again, and while Parker changed the ammunition on his battle rifle. "Finally getting a chance to use the explosive rounds," Parker said, as he looked at his rifle, and Jill snorted slightly. "You do realize that this type of ammunition is illegal today, don't you?" she said, watching the creature roar as it reloaded the quad launcher. The thing was smart enough to know how to use a gun, but didn't seem to be the smartest infected they've ever seen. "Who's going to arrest me, your brother? Please tell me one thing that we're going to have a bad day," Parker said, leaning his rifle on the window and open firing. His battle rifle was a SIG MCX Spear, with the magazine was a little smaller than normal due to the explosive ammunition. There was a laser attached to the side of the holographic sight with a 4x zoom, and unlike any ordinary camouflage, the rifle was platinum. They were all of his weapons, a professional preference. Not only that, but he was on an official mission against the soldiers who made no difference whenever his weapons were camouflaged or not. The first shot crashed into the creature's chest, a small explosion forming a deep wound, causing the monster to stagger backwards, almost falling backwards to the ground. Jill pulled the trigger together with Parker, causing a great deal of damage to the creature's tainted body, which in an angry roar raised the quad rifle again and fired at the two of them, who quickly left the window. The window exploded, causing another large hole in the wall. However, the explosions didn't stop there, and the two were forced to move back to the end of the factory, accompanied by the explosions getting closer and closer. As they stood up, they heard buzzing in their ears, a buzzing that was getting louder and louder, mixed with sound like flapping of wings of a very, very large insect. "Wow, what the?" Parker grunted, getting more disoriented as the noise got louder. His vision was getting blurry as he could hardly move. Jill was a little further away, but suffering from the same things. Parker then screamed in fright as he felt his body being grabbed and came face to face with a new creature. A mixture of human and insect, although the human part was barely recognizable. The head was human, with the face melted in state and lifeless eyes, with little hair still attached to the head. In front resembled a man with torso with legs hanging by in the air was deformed. The skull had split in half and the brain anteroped, forming a jaw-like opening that the creature opened freely. Instead of human hands, the claws took their space, and 3 wings appeared on each side of its back, like insect wings. A kind of gas that came out of its back, probably chemical component that was doing to their senses. Parker grunted as he felt himself being squeezed. That thing was strong, and it was about to break his spine. However, the creature roared and released him. When Jill fired at the range in their tactical shotgun, Parker fell to the ground, grunting in a mixture of pain and relief. His senses were slowly returning to normal as the creature stopped, releasing that strange gas. Jill realized how dangerous that thing was, and not wanting to give this second insectoid creature time to recover. She threw a grenade at its feet and pulled Parker away. The grenade exploded, and the creature fell to the ground in an aggravated roar. Its torso opened up a little, revealing similar small insects. Damn, that thing could reproduce. It was probably used Parker's body as food for its babies. Parker stood up. Its eyes were widened in the hole in the wall, where he realized he gritted his teeth and saw the huge creature aiming the quad launcher in his direction. He grabbed Jill and pulled her away just before the huge infected fired. The explosion of rocket finished off the insect ground, killing its offspring in the process. Well, good. Chris ducked, dodging a horizontal blow from the creature's huge axe in front of him. He quickly encountered with a body slam, knocking the creature to the ground. He then attaches the blade to the end of his rifle and loads his magazine into the monster, killing the infected. He stood up and reloads his rifle, turning to his companions shortly after. However, just as he did so, he heard the uncomfortable sound of flapping wings. Something was approaching, like an insect, and something was in the air, dulling his senses. His vision blurred and the sound buzzing got louder and louder. His insect screamed. He turned to soon realize that the noises were coming from behind him. He quickly grabbed his magnum, a Taurus raging bull, a gift from Barry on his visit to South America. He fired even though he couldn't exactly see where the infected was, and his eyes blinked in surprise when he saw a half-human, half-insect creature fall to the ground. "Chris, look out!" he heard Jill shouting for him, and just as he turned, he was hit by a strong fist to the face, stunning him. He grunted as he felt his body being jerked backwards, and the sound of something shattering caught his attention. He soon recovered, and an irritated grunt landed a knee to his attacker's stomach, followed by an elbow to the back. Putting his arms around the man's torso, he threw his attacker's body to the side and raised the rifle, until his eyes widened slightly and gritted his teeth. Krauser snorted, standing up and glaring at him with his knife. Chris didn't recognize him and responded immediately. He looked around with some surprise, concern, and confusion. The infected were running towards Parker and Jill's shots, but they passed right by them, and didn't even seem to notice that they were there. The infected were ignoring them. Krauser smiled, and he noticed the man's confusion. "Amazing, isn't it? They follow my orders without blinking. Controlling such creatures. Powerful is like that." Krauser played with his knife, throwing it into the air and catching it as he spun the blade around, showing extreme mystery. "They would do anything I want. Loyalty is what's hard to come by." "So you've made it. You've become the monster I knew you were," Chris said. He pointed his rifle at the center of the man's head. "Damn it, Krauser. You've always been an asshole, but I never thought you'd come to this. You were a good soldier." "Exactly. Being a good soldier wasn't enough. It was pathetic. So I would like a trained puppy like you." Just before Krauser finished speaking, he heard the cries of Jill and Parker, while Chris gritted his teeth in worry and anxiety. Krauser smiled almost completely. "Your friends seem to be in danger. You can go and save them, if you can kill me," Krauser said, throwing his knife at such a speed that Chris only reacted with the blade already a few centimeters away from him. And all he could do was throw his torso slightly to the side and raise his rifle in the form of protection. The knife jammed into the metal with such force that it almost penetrated the weapon almost completely. The impact was so much of a rifle knocked out of Chris's hands. The man clicked his tongue as he stared at Krauser's smug face. Superhuman or not, he would plunge a knife into that man's chest. Sherry walked around through the dark corridors of the abandoned laboratory. Her attentive eyes scanned the place with a certain frenzy, her body attentive to even the slightest noises around her. Everything seemed calm, but she knew she wasn't alone. After a couple minutes of walking, she passed by an old broken door, and her eyebrows arched slightly. The room she was in had overturned chairs, broken lamps, and the wall was next to it, completely destroyed where the blood stains should be all over it. The place seemed to be a lecture hall or something. There was a small stage at the front. After checking that there was nothing there, she followed the destroyed wall that was the other corridors, covered in debris from the fallen ceiling. As soon as she passed the destroyed wall, she walked into a cave, a deformed, unnatural cave. It had been created, not by the machines or anything like that, by something else. "Chris? Ghost? Anyone?" she asked through the radio. But after some time, she wasn't without an answer, just grunted in frustration and entered the cave. The place was crammed, but something big had certainly passed through. At a certain point, she arrived and led at the two directions. Ahead there was that place that seemed to be kind of cell. From what little she could see, to her left of the cave going up a little, and at the end could see a light from the outside. She followed the cave until she reached the outside. The sky was overcast and there was a strange smell in the air. She had looked around and realized that she was near the wall that surrounded the city. It looked like a normal place. There was a gas station a few hundred meters away, clearly abandoned. A street led off to where she left town, equally abandoned by the city's buildings around. Well, getting to the surface was easier than she thought. A noise came from behind her. Ah, of course. As soon as he turned around, her eyes widened at the sight of the huge creature right behind her. A man, or at least what was left of one. The man had wrinkled skin on the blisters around it, similar to a toad skin with a few tumors along this length. His eyes were large and bulging as his pupils dilated. There were stakes driven into his back, long claws on its fingers, and a huge axe in his hands. The creature wore torn clothes due to its mutation, but Sherry recognized him. They were very familiar. It was from the TerraSave uniform. No wonder why the man looked familiar. The creature immediately attacked her with its huge axe, trying to split her in half. A vertical attack from top to bottom. Sherry sidestepped by throwing her body to the side, and cringed as she heard the large sounds of the axe smash into the ground, and the destruction caused where she had once stood. The creature roared and acted quickly before the girl could counterattack. The monster tried a horizontal attack with its claws, but Sherry was quicker and ducked, dodging the blow and taking a long strides away from the shot of the creature's head with their rifle. The creature grunted as she felt the shots, and its huge arm in front of its head prepared to protect itself. As it approached, dragging the axe along the ground, Sherry let out a scream without realizing it ducked, feeling the strong wind hit her face with bits of dirt and grass. She moved away quickly and threw a stun gun at the ground. That was the first time she had faced a creature like that on her own. Zombies weren't a problem. Liquor she could handle. She was capable of a creature like that, and she had just had to calm down. Taking a deep breath, memories of her training surfaced, along with memories of ghost movements. This way she thought the creature had the airport. Determined, she ran towards the creature, which roared loudly again and raised its axe. Quickly, the moment that the creature attacked her, she ducked and threw herself forward, leaving her dirt body slide through the dirt and hearing the axe just above her head. Without giving the creature time to turn around, she grabs the two knives and jumps into the monster's back. The creature in turn grunted and struggled to get it off its back. Sherry was quicker and plunged the two knives into the monster's eyes, pulling its head back with all of her strength, planted her feet on the creature's back, forcing the infected to stagger a few steps. From her tactical vest, she takes the grenades and sticks one of the knives into the monster's mouth, forcing it to keep its mouth open. She then puts the grenade in the creature's mouth and jumps back, just before the grenade explodes. The monster fell to the ground with a dry thud, its mouth dried and its deformed head by the explosion. Well, at least that was what's left of its head. Sherry stared at the creature's fallen body for a few moments. She blinked a few times. She had just repeated what Ghost had said to do, and she was pleasantly surprised to see that it worked. Surprisingly, he had moved away to eliminate the unnecessary movement. It was a practical, straightforward. Perhaps could be a bit of her own style. Grunts could be heard here coming closer, as she turned with an unfriendly expression to the small horde of infected that were approaching. Of course, that noise would attract the attention of nearby infected. The first infected to approach tried to attack her with a piece of metal. However, Sherry interrupted him by kicking him in his right leg, causing him to stagger for a few steps. She then turned and shot the infected twice in the back, and once on the back of the head. The second approached quickly, attacking her with punches and scratches. However, she dodged the first attack by crouching down and throwing her torso to the left, and then stopped at the infected's next attack by throwing her elbow into the bloody hand. She then placed the barrel of the rifle against the infected's chest and fired, causing the monster to stagger backwards. Then she finished it off with a shot to the head. Sherry sighed a little as she had to deal with it and soon called for her group. But in the meantime, she would try and eliminate the hostiles nearby, Redfield style, and as she made her way through the small horde, she didn't even notice the figure with huge bag over its head, watching her from not far away. Claire grunted as she felt pieces of wood hit her face. Her eyes focused on the half-insect creature that was trying every way to pierce her body. What was left of her human features quickly became consumed by whatever that infection was. The woman raised her semi-automatic rifle and fired once, twice. The gun was strong enough to destroy the creature with a few shots. So far, just one had been shot enough to eliminate the threat. The dead body of the infected fell backwards, and just like another, it threw itself against the wooden planks that protected her. Claire gritted her teeth and threw herself out the window behind her, entering the abandoned cabin. That small, destroyed village inside the cabin were two infected who were already heading towards in that direction. She put the shotgun on her back and picked up her rifle, shooting both infected with great precision. She would try and use her rifle more than of her other weapons, and she had more ammunition and shotgun that would be useful in more resistant creatures. Right behind her, the infected insect destroyed the wall and advanced towards her. Claire turned at the same time, and she picked up her shotgun and fired your point blank at the creature, literally blowing off what was left of its humanoid parts and head of its torso. At the end, she thought she was fine. However, she soon gritted her teeth as she heard heavy footsteps behind her, and as she turned, she reflectively dodging the blade of the huge axe and aimed at her head. Another thing with those big creatures with the metal cage protecting her head. There now, she would have to find a way of piercing it. The woman stepped backwards and picked up her rifle, firing at the creature's head. The armor-piercing ammunition penetrated the metal and pierced the creature's head, which remained motionless for a few moments, until it fell backwards onto the ground. Good, maybe then it wouldn't be such a problem. Sighing, she concentrated. She didn't hear any other infected nearby, so she could hear the low breathing and the whisper of nearby survivors. She walked through the abandoned rooms of the hut and left the place, walking towards the greatest building there. It looked like some kind of bar. The sign had long since disoriented, and the windows were still being preserved, considering the state of the other places. In fact, it was probably the best preserved building there. "Hey, I know you're still there," she said, knocking twice on the window as she knocked. "No fucking way. Did they survive? Did they kill all those monsters?" A voice quite very familiar said. "Was it Claire's voice?" another asked, and Claire smiled slightly in relief as she recognized them. "Pedro, Gabe, I hear you," she said, smiling as she heard Pedro. "Holy shit, it's her!" The doors opened, and they found her colleague Gabriel just standing with a relieved smile. "Redfield, it's so good to see you," he said, giving her room to enter. And as she did so, she came across Neil, standing a further away, pistol in his hand, and a surprised expression on his face. "Neil!" She ran towards him, hugging him tightly, self spreading through his chest. She felt him embracing her, his surprise evident in his grip. "Claire, I'm glad you're all right," he said, pulling away slightly from the embrace shortly afterwards, looking deep in her eyes. I had no idea where they'd taken you. I was worried. Me too. It wasn't easy waking up and realize I was alone, she said, holding hands in front of her stomach. I woke up in a cell of some kind of underground prison. I ran into Gabe and Pedro. I was trying to get out. We were chased and we found this place, he explained, taking a few steps away, although Claire felt her insides protest from its lack of warmth. She understood that she had more important things to do at the moment. I woke up in a truck. There was an accident while they were transporting me. It wasn't easy, but I managed to escape, she said, alternating her gaze between her and her colleagues. Claire, you kill all those things? Peter asked, loudly in surprise, interrupting the small talk between the two. Redfield here is pretty tough, by the way. Where did you get those guns? Gabe asked, and Claire just shook her head. She would leave her conversation with Neil for later. Some guards died in the accident, while others were dealing with calling the infected who were lured there. I got it from some bodies, she said, walking over to the nearest table, placing her 2 pistols on it. I don't have that many guns on me. Here, take those. It was a good amount of ammo, but it might run out faster than we can count, she said, watching Gabe and Pedro take the pistol and 2 mags of ammunition each. Got any ammo? She asked Neil, who was standing with her with the pistol in his hand. No, I used it all to get in here, he said. Claire took the shotgun off her back and handed it to him, as well as the ammunition mags. Me, Pedro, and Gabe will eliminate the common infected. Save the shotgun ammo. It's the strongest weapon we have, she said, and realized that he was looking at her with an arched eyebrow. Don't get me wrong, but my aim is better than yours, and the less ammunition we use, the better. Neil grimaced and raised his arms. Of course, Miss Redfield, at your service, he joked, and Claire scratched the back of her head. So what's the plan? Claire asked, leaning against a small wooden door. Find a vehicle and get us out of here. A helicopter, a boat, Neil said, putting the shotgun on his back and crossing his arms. What about a car? I know we can get a van. Maybe it's not so trash, Claire suggested. We'll be doing that for nothing. We're on an island, Claire, Gabe said, and the woman ran her hand through her hair. That complicated things a bit, but it made sense. We saw a helicopter crash a while ago. We thought we'd go and find out what's happened, but there were too many infected. Okay. Anywhere in mind then? She asked, putting her hands onto her waist. Let's look for a helicopter. There's a facility nearby, a destroyed laboratory. We can use some of the hangars there, similar to an airport, Gabe said, shuffling the ammunition into his pockets. Far? Claire asked. No, but there are a lot of infected. Now with these weapons we should be able to make it without too much trouble, I hope, Neil said. Okay then, the sooner we go the better, Claire said. After everyone nodded in confirmation, they walked towards the door. Gabe led the way, Claire close behind, followed by Peter and finally Neil. Just to warn you, there are several infected behind us and our ammunition is limited. Let's try not to distract any attention, Gabe said, following a small dirt road that they had just finally left the small village. I have a knife. Does anyone here need a melee weapon? Claire asked quietly, looking around for the passing iron gates. The village was surrounded by a stone wall, which was curious, but soon they were entering a forest. I have a Karmet bit knife, Pedro said, and as they ducked down, hiding along the vegetation, there was a small dirt track, probably one used to get to the village. The vegetarian covered the path almost completely, leaving it hidden at the time. Claire squinted slightly. The infected were scattered around, walking aimlessly through in the vegetation. There were a lot of them, but they were very spread out. All right, you and me, we'll go and take out all the infected we can in silence, Claire said, turning to them. What? Peter asked, his eyes slightly wide. There's too many of them. If we shoot for there, we'll have a horde on top of us. It'll be dangerous if we have a close-up of our little ammunition. A knife is just enough to save some of our bullets, Claire explained, resting an arm on his thigh. She's right, not to mention we attract even more with those things towards us, Gabe said. I'm not very good at this, Pedro said. You have more experience with bioweapons than I do. Give me the knife then. I'll do it, Neil said, taking Peter's place. Then he faced Claire. Are you sure about this? Yes, it's better than wasting ammo, Claire said. just before turning and sneaking towards the infected further ahead. Quickly, she grabbed the infected by the neck and put her hand over its mouth so it wouldn't make much of a sound, and plunged her knife deep into the creature's neck, followed by its lifeless body to the ground. She looked over at Neil and saw Neil doing the same, and further back, Gabe and Pedro were crouching in silence. She sneaked up on the two figures along, and with one swift movement, she kicked behind one in the knee, turned the other, plunging the knife deep into the infected's neck. In one smooth, agile moment, she plunged the blade into the other infected's eye, pushing it to the ground soon after. She smiled soon as she got the incredible looks and whispers of the two men behind her. They continued the silent carnage for some time, until the woman's eyes focused on the creature ahead. The creature was larger than the rest of the infected, and walked with a bent back. Its skin was gray and had claws instead of arms. However, that was the most striking thing, was its body. It was as if the creature had created several parts, and several other bodies thrown together. A real Frankenstein, only more bizarre and cruel, since there were signs of torture all over its body. Or rather, a pile of bodies. Claire suppressed a small, startled groan as she felt a hand on her shoulder. She was so focused on the creature that she didn't even notice when Neil approached. "Careful, that thing's pretty tough. Ordinary weapons hardly do any damage," she said, standing next to her. "Really? How do you know?" Claire asked. "I've seen some guards face something like that. The bullets stun, but they don't kill," he said. "So what do we do?" "Simple. Those creatures have a weakness. It works like a heart, and it changes the location from time to time. It's a pulsating yellow ball, but it moves inside the body, which makes it difficult to locate," Neil explained, and Claire took something similar to her tactical vest. "I've got this." She shoved a grenade in her hand. "Well, it worked, but it will distract a lot of attention. I can knock that thing over and stick your knife in its back. The weak point will show," he said, and Claire stared at him for a few moments. How did he know? "Are you sure?" was all she asked, ignoring the feeling in her chest. "Trust me," was all he said, before sneaking towards the creature. Claire followed up behind him and waited for him to act. Quickly, Neil ran up and kicked the creature in the back, knocking it to the ground. Claire approached to plunge her knife into the creature's back, and Neil left it immobilized. "It didn't appear," she grunted slightly. "Stab some more," Neil said, and as she did, viciously stabbed the creature's back until one point, a large yellow ball destroyed skin and flesh around the creature's head. Claire raised her body and stabbed the yellow ball, which exploded with a mixture of pus and blood. Neil stood up next to Claire, both of them observing the emotionless body of the disfigured figure. "Well, it worked," Claire said, without showing a disgusted expression at the pus that stained her knife in hand. "I told you," Neil said, watching the crambit. "It doesn't look like there'll be other of those things around." He signaled for the other two to come closer. "Is everything all right with you guys?" Gabe asked, looking around somewhat uneasily. Claire understood him. He felt very exposed there. "Yes, everything's fine. We managed to eliminate all those that were relevant. The way the facility is that way," Neil said, pointing to the right. There was a dirt track just above the hidden one. The previous one was destroyed in front of the corner of the sign. "Great, we're close then," Pedro said. "But isn't that direction we saw the helicopter crash? Hopefully the infected already left. We can't stay here," Neil said. "The sooner we get there, the better. Maybe we can get a map there," Claire said, following the indicated path. "That's weird. I would have sworn that there were infected around here," Gabe said, discomfort evident in his voice. "I'm not going to complain about that," Pedro said, constantly looking over his shoulder. "Are you guys okay? I mean, they didn't do anything wrong to you," Claire said, taking advantage of the small movement just to get some information. However, as little as it was, I mean, I don't feel any different. I don't think there's anything wrong with us. I mean, apart from those weird bracelets," Gabe replied, raising his arm pointing to the bracelet on his wrist. Claire noticed she had this earlier, but she hadn't asked due to the inopportune moment. "Mine's been locked on orange since we left the prison. Gabe's is still yellow, as is Neil's," Peter noted, raising his wrist. "I don't know what the fuck this is. I don't feel anything different." "That's weird," Neil said, looking at his bracelet. "Odd to say the least. For all we know, these things could have trackers. Someone could be monitoring you," Claire said, trying to control that growing feeling in her chest. Something was wrong. Her instincts were screaming it. If that's the case, we better get out of here as soon as possible, Neil said, sounding a little apprehensive, but calm. Too calm. They didn't put it on you, Claire, Gabe said, looking at the woman's arms. What happened to you? I woke up tied up in the back of the truck. There were soldiers around. We had a little accident and there were infected people on the route they were using. I took advantage of the accident to escape. She told the half-truth, hiding some changing points that didn't need to be said. That's why they probably didn't put it on you. You were still being transported, Peter said, the more apprehensive as everyone was there. Why? Claire said. She didn't know why exactly. Why'd they put us apart? No idea, Neil replied, glancing her out of the corner of the eye, just before focusing his gaze on the laboratory that was approaching his line of sight. We're not the only ones on this island, that's for sure. I think whoever brought us here runs different tests on different people.